My name is Adam Stick, and I grew up in Delaware County. We moved, I'd say about 8 or 10 miles northwest of where I was born. Basically, that's where I grew up at, a little community over there, what they call Gray Community. I had 2 sisters. My dad's name was William Stick, but everybody just called him Bill. And my mama's name was Mary, and she went by Drywater. She come from Rocky Ford community.
Did you speak Cherokee in your family growing up?
I had to because my mom and dad, that's all they could speak was Cherokee.
And how was that for you when you went to school?
It was kind of rough to learn to try to learn another language. It was hard when you're used to just speaking your native tongue. Where we lived at, the county transferred me over to Uchi School. I had the teacher come by and got me, picked me up of a morning and took me home of an evening in their personal car. Because back then, there was a lot of the school kids, they had to walk a few miles to get to school back then. And I got lucky. I was pretty fortunate. We was made to talk our own language back then, our own tongue. And I would say something to Dad in English, and he'd get on to me. He'd say, "You ain't supposed to talk that way." He said, "You want to talk to me, you talk your native tongue." A lot of times we just drove cars around. Playing, we just drove cars around and we'd put some of that dry dust inside the tire so we'd get it to smoke as we were rolling them around. Then we'd, for wrecks, we'd run them tires together to have wrecks. We all got some used bicycles at one time, so we all had 3 bicycles, a bicycle apiece. Before that, I was fortunate enough that Dad bought me a used bicycle at one time, and when they came over, we had to just take turns riding the bicycle. I've missed many a meal playing out in the woods, running, climbing trees, swinging on grapevines. When I was asked to come and eat, when it was time to eat, and I didn't show up, and then when I did show up looking for something, Dad would tell me, he said, "No." Said, "You was called for earlier." Said, "You'll have to do without till morning." But we didn't have hot water. It was just cold water, just right out of the well, just piped into the house. And that was the first time that I can recall ever having what you would call running water in the house. Before we had some cream cans. We had about 4 or 5 of them, and we would either go to Round Springs Church and get water from the well there, or we'd go down to the spring, which was just a mile away from where we lived, and we'd go down there and fill them cream cans up down there in the spring. The house we lived in just had a little side room on it, and it's pretty cool in there. And so Dad just set up a table and lay them slabs of hog on that and just douse it down with salt. And then when whatever cut Mom or Dad decided they wanted, they just go in and slice that off and then douse it back down with salt again. When they would get milk, me or Dad or Mom or me, one of them, we'd walk down there to the creek, and then we'd walk down there of a morning, take that jug of milk, put it down there in that creek to cool. And then when Dad got home from work, me and him would go down there and get that jug of milk, bring back home, and it wouldn't be freezing cold, but it would be tolerable. From where I was born, the nearest store was about a mile away. Mom would run out of something, and we would walk to the store, because like I said, it wasn't but a mile away, and we'd walk to the store, and And occasionally, somebody that Mom knew or knew, that we knew was an acquaintance, they'd give us a ride back home after Mom got her groceries. The big thing about going to the store was when Dad would let me get a bottle of pop. Back then, it was RC. Talking to somebody, I remember the old RC bottles. They come up and just kind of narrowed up, but then they was smooth all the way around, from the bottom to the top. They were smooth, and then when they come out with the new bottles, RC bottles, they kind of had ridges on them all the way around. My grandpa, he used to walk everywhere he went. He never did drive, but he walked everywhere he went, and he traded down there at the same store where Mom and Dad did. And when there's a few times I thought I'd go to the store with him, and he'd be walking, and I'd have to run to keep up with him. Back then, they used to have a sale barn there at Jay. And people would go there, and people would set up, and it was kind of like a flea market thing, just out in the open. People had just a little bit of this and that there. And Dad liked to go there from time to time, and when we went for the day. To me, Jay was a little busier back then than what it is now, and people was a lot more friendlier back then. When we'd go to that sale I was talking about there in town, there, Jay, where the sale barn used to be, every now and then from time to time, I'd get to smelling a hamburger. And then I would ask Dad if he'd buy me a hamburger. Could I have a hamburger? And sometimes he'd let me have it, and sometimes he wouldn't. But we'd go in that bar and grill and get a hamburger. And a lot of times I just had for a hamburger and maybe something to drink. It wasn't an every weekend treat. It was just from time to time treat, but I enjoyed it when I got it. People used to go and visit back then. There was none of this. When back then people had, I'll call it, people had love for one another back then, because when something happened, not everybody, but I shouldn't say everybody, but there was a lot of people went and helped out. When something, like if there was a death close by, people would go there and the men folk would work out in the yard, and the lady folks would clean up in the house.